was going to review a movie tonight, but I just saw a play about an outrageous historical event that had me so outraged, I decided to review the play instead. It's called Execution of Justice. This play, like so many others that pass for theater on Broadway these days, does more to execute the audience than to put forth anything new in the way of ideas, themes, or even a point of view. And this is one case when no point of view makes for no drama, hence no play. It's a courtroom drama centered on the assassinations in 1978 of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and his political ally and friend, Harvey Milk. Milk was the first avowedly gay candidate ever to run and win in California. The murderer turned out to be a fellow politician named Dan White. His conservative politics clashed miserably with his liberal colleagues. The point of view that author-director Emily Mann was striving for is that Dan White killed Milk and Moscone for political reasons. White, it could be argued, was a homophobe, and it is this element that Mann was probably hoping would make the most lasting impression. But that point was obscured as much as the rest of the play. By the end, you practically sympathized with White. And yet, with overhead projections of Moscone and Milk in slow motion, amidst soft music and candlelight, you know you're supposed to feel sadness and outrage about the victims. But you leave the theater feeling worse about White. The result is no feelings at all. You just don't care. Sometimes sitting through a boring play does pay off, as in the case of Waiting for Godot. It is interminable, but worth it. You learn from that play. Execution of Justice is a perfect example of what I call a pool of manure play. When you watch it, you feel as though you were diving into a pool of manure in search of some elusive pearl of wisdom or insight. I didn't find any pearls in Execution of Justice, just a lot of shameful writing. I'm Roma Friedman. When you go to a film and discover that its title is preceded by the words, "From the makers of Miami Vice," you know you're in trouble. But Band of the Hand, Just Such a Film, is not quite what you'd expect from the makers of Miami Vice. It was kind of fun, something like a grade B version of the Dirty Dozen, only instead of 12 heroes, there were 5. The story has to do with 5 juvenile delinquents who are taken out of prison and sent to some godforsaken swampland in Florida. There they meet a former Marine who teaches them the techniques of survivalism. The boys are resistant at first, but soon absorb their lessons, and in so doing develop the self-esteem and maturity to become responsible adults. It sounds hokey, I know, but this first half of the film was quite enjoyable. The actors, most of them unknown, were exceptionally good. The script called for some unnecessary stereotyping, but the actors managed to pull off even those embarrassing moments quite well. Only in the second half did the film start to fall apart. That's when the boys moved to Miami, and the makers of Miami Vice presumably moved in as well. Lots of drugs, guns, some sex, but just like on Miami Vice, not too much, and a gang of evil mafia types that seemed to be rejects from the set of Scarface. The film could have been better, but in fairness, coming from the makers of Miami Vice, it could have been a lot worse. I'm Roma Torre. When it comes to wildlife pictures with lots of scope and lavish scenery, Out of Africa can't be beat. But if you're the type of moviegoer that cares as much about the story as you do the scenery, Out of Africa is bound to be disappointing. It's just so undramatic. This movie will probably win the Academy Award for Best Picture because it seems to have all the right elements. Big stars, based on a true story, lots of animals, syphilis. Meryl Streep plays a Danish woman who marries an adventuresome heel. He buys a tobacco farm in Kenya, Africa, and she joins him. While in Africa, the marriage falls apart, and she meets up with a rugged jungle explorer played by Robert Redford. They fall in love, and for the following half hour, we're treated to all those beautiful jungle scenes. And that almost takes us to the end of the film. Believe me, with the exception of the final 10 minutes, which I can't in good conscience spoil for you, that's all that happens. Meryl Streep gives another solid, technically immaculate performance. I know that Robert Redford has been harshly criticized for his acting in this film, but I thought he was just fine. He's supposed to be British, but as long as he's believable, who cares that he doesn't have an accent? And Klaus Maria Brandauer is terrific as the husband. He had just the right subtleties to make him sympathetic and loathsome at the same time. There's nothing terribly wrong with Out of Africa, but if you're like me and crave just a little more than boy meets girl, boy loses girl, then you may want to skip this safari. I'm Roma Torre. Theater going is risky business these days. Once you decide what play to see, you plunk down the $40 or so and pray you get your money's worth. Well, I'm happy to report in the case of Sweet Charity, God has been kind. The Bob Fosse revival is a near masterpiece. It's a brilliant integration of a solid book, lavish original music, and wonderfully evocative choreography. It's the kind of choreography that puts you in awe of the human body, and I was in awe of Mr. Fosse for making me feel that way. Bob Fosse has not only managed to evoke the 60s with wit, charm, and a touch of satire, he's also transcended that era. This musical is every bit as entertaining now as it must have been 20 years ago, and probably more so. The music by Cy Coleman and Dorothy Fields doesn't sound the least bit dated. That scene when all the dance hall girls pose in a crooked line and belt out "Hey Big Spender" is nothing short of a painting that talks. It's exquisite.
I don't pop my corn for every guy I see. Hey Big Spender.
For all the credit that Bob Fosse deserves for the success of Sweet Charity, he by no means stands alone. He had a lot of help, principally from star Debbie Allen. She is a dynamo on stage, singing, dancing, and acting well above anything I've seen in musicals in recent years. The other actors performed as though it's natural for people to just up and sing in the middle of conversation. If I had to voice any reservations about this production, it would be that the new ending is too downbeat for the uplifting theme. But then, that's just part of the rhythm of life, and Mr. Fosse could probably teach us all a lesson on that subject. I'm Roma Torre.